So you think you understand how a Tesla Gigafactory works? A building so big you could fit dozens of shopping malls inside it, packed with machines stamping out batteries nonstop, robots everywhere, cars and battery packs rolling out the other end? Same basic idea as any factory, just enormous. Here's the problem. That mental model misses the one detail that actually explains why this building looks nothing like a normal factory once you follow a single battery cell through it from raw material to finished product. This isn't really a factory built to make batteries. It's a factory built to make the machines that make batteries cheaper and faster than anyone else on Earth can. And that distinction, which sounds like a technicality, is the reason almost every strange decision inside that building exists at all. Start at the very beginning of that journey, before a single cell exists, the electrode. In a traditional lithium-ion battery factory making the electrode, the thin-coated foil that sits inside every cell means mixing active material into a liquid slurry with a solvent, coating that wet slurry onto a foil, and then running that foil through an oven that can stretch the length of a football field, baking off the solvent so the coating dries and bonds properly. That drying oven is one of the single biggest, most energy-hungry, most floor space-consuming pieces of equipment in a conventional battery plant, and the solvent itself is expensive to buy, expensive to recover, and requires its own separate recovery system just to avoid venting toxic fumes into the air. Tesla's engineering answer to this was to try to skip the liquid step almost entirely, called a dry electrode process. Instead of a wet slurry, the active material is mixed as something closer to a fine dry powder, bonded together using friction and pressure rather than a liquid solvent, and pressed directly onto the foil in a way that needs little to no oven drying afterward. If you can get that process to work reliably at scale, you delete an entire building's worth of ovens and solvent recovery systems, cut a huge chunk of the energy bill per cell, and shrink the physical footprint needed to make the same number of batteries. The catch, and it's a serious one, is that dry processed powder behaves completely differently from wet slurry on a production line. It's harder to bond evenly, harder to keep at a stable thickness across a wide roll of foil moving at high speed, and small inconsistencies that a wet process would smooth over on its own become visible defects that have to be caught before that electrode ever becomes part of a working cell. Follow that electrode a few steps further and you hit the second major bet baked into this building: the shape and size of the cell itself. For years, the industry standard cell looked like a slightly oversized AA battery, a format commonly called 2170, meaning about 21 millimeters wide and 70 millimeters tall. Tesla's newer cell format, called 4680, is roughly 4 times the volume of that older cell, meaning you need far fewer individual cells to build the same battery pack, which means far fewer welded connections, far fewer points of electrical resistance, and far less assembly complexity per kilowatt-hour of storage. But making a cell bigger creates a genuine physics problem that a smaller cell doesn't have to deal with as severely. Heat generated at the center of a large cylindrical cell has to travel farther to escape through the outer casing. And a cell that can't shed heat fast enough during rapid charging or hard driving is a cell that degrades faster or, in the worst case, becomes a safety risk. Tesla's fix for this was a redesign of the internal current path, called a tabless design, where instead of a single small tab carrying current out of one end of the cell, the entire edge of the electrode is connected directly, shortening the internal electrical path, and just as importantly, giving heat a much shorter, lower resistance path to escape along as well. Bigger cell, less assembly complexity, but only if you solve a thermal engineering problem that a smaller cell was never forced to solve in the first place. Zoom out from the individual cell now to the building around it. Because the layout itself is engineered around a single obsession: never let a half-built battery or car sit still waiting for its turn. A conventional factory tends to be organized as a sequence of specialized departments, stamping in one building, welding in another, painting somewhere else entirely, with partially finished vehicles or components trucked or conveyed between them, sitting in queues at each handoff. A gigafactory is instead designed, as much as physically possible, as one continuous flow under a single roof, raw materials arriving at one end, finished packs or vehicles leaving at the other, with as few stops, as little inventory sitting idle, and as little distance traveled in between as engineers can manage. The reasoning is almost accounting-like in its simplicity. A half-finished battery pack sitting in a queue isn't earning anything. It's just capital tied up and depreciating. And every meter of unnecessary travel between processes is time. The whole line isn't converting raw material into revenue. This is also why these buildings tend to be enormous single structures, rather than several smaller ones spread across a campus. Every additional building means loading docks, trucks, and idle time between processes that a single continuous structure can simply design away. Follow the energy itself into the building now, because a plant that makes batteries has an unusually direct incentive to think hard about how it gets its own electricity. Several of these facilities have been built with large adjacent solar arrays, and in some cases, battery storage systems using the company's own stationary battery products, effectively letting the factory smooth out its own power demand, using the same technology it's manufacturing inside. The engineering logic is straightforward. A facility this size running high-power equipment around the clock, casting machines, drying and curing processes, climate control across millions of square feet, has enormous and sometimes spiky electricity demand, and a factory that can flatten its own demand curve using on-site generation and storage reduces its exposure to peak electricity pricing and grid instability in a way a building that simply draws everything from the public grid cannot. Water tells a similar story. Battery-grade manufacturing needs large volumes of extremely clean water for certain chemical processes, and several of these facilities have been built around closed-loop water recycling systems designed to treat and reuse water on-site rather than continuously drawing fresh supply and discharging wastewater. Both because of cost and because of the genuine environmental and community pressure that comes with a facility this size sitting near a regional water table. None of this matters, though, if the cells coming off the line aren't consistent, and this is where the least visible but most mathematically important part of the whole operation lies. Statistical process control at a scale most industries never have to deal with. A single gigafactory can be producing cells at a rate of many per second across parallel lines, which means even a defect rate of a fraction of 1% translates into a meaningful number of bad cells every single day, and a single undetected internal defect in a lithium-ion cell isn't a minor quality miss, it's a potential safety incident once that cell is inside a finished vehicle. So every stage of that dry electrode coating, every weld on that tabless current path, every cell casing seal gets measured constantly against tight statistical tolerances, with automated systems pulling suspect cells out of the line long before a human inspector could ever manually check them all. The trade-off embedded in this is speed versus paranoia. Run the inspection thresholds too loose and you risk a defect, making it into a finished pack. Run them too tight, and you throw away and rework cells that were actually fine, eating into the very cost advantage the whole Gigafactory concept is supposed to deliver in the first place. Tuning exactly where that threshold sits for every single process step is an ongoing engineering job, not a switch you set once. Here's the part of this story Tesla has actually been public and unusually candid about, because scaling a genuinely new cell chemistry and format at this size turned out to be far harder than the announcements initially suggested. The company has publicly acknowledged that ramping 43680 cell production took considerably longer than planned. That manufacturing yield, meaning the percentage of cells produced that actually meet quality specifications, lagged behind targets for an extended stretch, and that the dry electrode process in particular proved to be one of the hardest parts of the whole system to get running reliably at full manufacturing speed rather than just in a lab or a pilot line. This is the same lesson that shows up in almost every attempt to redesign a manufacturing process from first principles instead of incrementally improving an existing one. A process that works beautifully at small scale in a lab can behave in completely unexpected ways once you try to run it continuously, at full speed 24 hours a day, with human operators and imperfect raw material batches instead of a controlled lab environment. The gap between we got it working once and we can run this reliably forever at full volume is where most of the real engineering time and money in a project like this actually goes, far more than the original invention of the process itself. Step back even further from the cell itself, though. And there's a whole layer of engineering happening before a single gram of active material ever reaches that dry electrode line, because a gigafactory this size creates a strange incentive most manufacturers never have to think about, bringing the supply chain physically closer, sometimes onto the exact same site. Refining lithium into battery-grade material has traditionally been a separate industry entirely, handled by specialized chemical processors, an ocean away from any car company, with raw material shipped across the world, multiple times between mining, refining, and cell manufacturing. Tesla has built at least one lithium refining facility of its own, directly connected to a gigafactory site, using a different refining chemistry than the traditional industry standard specifically because it produces less hazardous byproduct and can be run with a smaller environmental footprint close to a populated area. The engineering logic mirrors everything else in this building. Every additional facility a raw material has to travel to and from is time, cost, and a supply chain risk that a company doesn't control. Pull that step onto the same site or close to it, and a shortage or price spike somewhere else in the world stops being able to halt your own production line the way it can for a competitor who depends entirely on outside refiners. There's one more layer worth understanding because it explains why walking through one of these buildings feels so different depending on which section you're standing in. The deliberate, uneven distribution of humans versus robots across the site, and it's not spread evenly by accident. The most repetitive, most physically taxing, and most precision-dependent stages, winding tens of thousands of feet of electrode material at consistent tension, welding thousands of tiny connections with sub-millimeter tolerance, run almost entirely unattended, sometimes literally in the dark, because there's no human vision system involved and no need for factory lighting tuned for human eyes at all. Walk a few hundred feet over to final pack assembly or quality inspection, though, and you'll find noticeably more people, because the tasks left over at that stage, catching an edge case, a vision system flagged as ambiguous, handling final wiring connections that vary slightly between vehicle configurations, are exactly the tasks that are cheaper and more reliable to hand to a trained person than to engineer a robot for. The building isn't uniformly automated or uniformly staffed, it's engineered zone by zone, with the automation to human ratio in each section reflecting a constant, ongoing calculation about which specific task is currently cheaper and more reliable to hand to a machine versus which one still belongs to a person at that exact point in time. So if you put all of this together, what actually determines whether a gigafactory like this works isn't any single piece of clever technology in isolation. The dry electrode process only pays off if the statistical process control catching its inconsistencies is tight enough to keep bad electrode out of good cells. The larger 43680 cell format only makes sense once the tabless design actually solves the thermal problem that comes with making a cell that much bigger. The entire continuous flow layout of the building only delivers its cost advantage if the on-site power, water, and refined raw material supply can actually keep up with a facility running that intensely without constant interruptions. And even the decision of where to place a robot versus a person has to be revisited constantly, as both the technology and the cost of labor shift underneath it. Every one of these systems is a bet that only pays off in combination with the others, and getting even one of them wrong at full production scale is exactly what turned an ambitious cell format into a multi-year engineering slog instead of the smooth ramp the announcements once promised. So the next time you see a battery pack pulled out of a car, remember that what you're looking at isn't really the product of a factory that assembles batteries. It's the product of a much stranger machine, one built to manufacture its own manufacturing process, chasing every wasted second, every degree of unwanted heat, and every fraction of a percent of defective material out of a system that has to run correctly, without stopping at a scale most industries have never had to attempt before.